Welcome to The Satoshi Suspects, a series where we profile the most likely candidates behind the mysterious Bitcoin creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. In each short episode, we take a look at an individual who either could be Satoshi themselves or could have contributed to Bitcoin if Satoshi Nakamoto is in fact a group and not simply one person. This episode will focus on Hal Finney. Harold or Hal Finney was an American software developer and, as you probably have guessed, a cypherpunk. Finney studied at Caltech University and earned a Bachelor's of Engineering in 1979. After college, he worked on console games before shifting careers and moving to PGP Corporation. PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy. Hal Finney was very interested in online privacy. Outside of work, he posted regularly on the cypherpunk email list via Listserv, an early mailing list service. He also ran 2 anonymous remailing lists, having created the first ever anonymous remailer. This allowed users to email while keeping their identity concealed for the first time. It is easy to see then why Bitcoin appealed to privacy-obsessed Finney. The Satoshi links get even stronger when in 2004, Hal created RPOW, or Reusable Proof of Work, the same proof of work algorithm used to secure and mine new Bitcoin on the blockchain today. However, Finney says that he came across Bitcoin when Satoshi went public in November 2008. He was the first ever person to download the software and also has the honor of receiving the first ever Bitcoin transfer on January 10th, 2009, 10 Bitcoin from Satoshi. Finney wrote of his initial excitement around Bitcoin when others were skeptical. Quote, "When Satoshi first announced the release of the software, I grabbed it right away. Cryptographers have seen too many grand schemes by clueless noobs. They tend to have a knee-jerk reaction. This is where the Satoshi conspiracy really begins. Hal Finney is privacy obsessed and created proof of work. Then he immediately adopts and begins working on the anonymous digital currency when it is first announced. Now, Finney and Satoshi communicated regularly with each other in the early days of Bitcoin via email. Hal's wife Fran released many of these emails under Hal's instruction. Interestingly, some of the emails from Satoshi to Hal Finney contain in their metadata a timestamp, and some have the timestamp stripped out. Satoshi's timestamped emails are sent from a time zone 8 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time or GMT. This would put him in Japan, which lines up with the Japanese origins of the name Satoshi Nakamoto. If Hal Finney is Satoshi, he went to exceptional lengths emailing himself from 2 different accounts, only to release the emails years later. Some eagle-eyed analysts have also discovered that a short email exchange between Finney and Nakamoto from 2009 shows that a message sent from Satoshi's account that Hal had responded to somehow managed to hit Hal Finney's email server before it hit Satoshi's, leading many to argue that Finney was responding to himself and had 2 email addresses running from the same email server. It's quite technical, and I have left a link to the original CoinDesk article that discusses this anomaly. A less technical but more intriguing Satoshi connection also has many convinced that Hal Finney did create Bitcoin and disguise himself as Satoshi. In 2014, Newsweek magazine outed unemployed Japanese-American scientist Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto as Bitcoin's creator. Unfortunately, his name was about the only piece of evidence linking him to the project, and his image has become nothing more than a meme in the Bitcoin community since. What makes this relevant, however, is that Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto lived just 2 blocks, or 1 mile away from Hal Finney in Temple City, California. If Finney was indeed the Bitcoin creator and needed an alias to work under, maybe he knew of Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto and just thought his name was cool and decided to use it. We don't know if this is a coincidence or a significant clue. There were 1,770 people in the US with the surname Nakamoto in the 2010 census. There were also 799 people with the first name Satoshi. That doesn't mean much, but it's important to highlight that others exist apart from Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto with at least 50% of the name. It's certainly more plausible that Hal is Satoshi, but we may now have missed the opportunity to find out for sure. Sadly, Hal Finney was battling ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease for the final 5 years of his life. He passed away on August 28, 2014, aged just 58 years old. Many point to this timeline as the explanation for Satoshi stepping away from Bitcoin on April 23, 2011. His death would also explain the complete lack of movement of the estimated 1.1 million Bitcoin in Satoshi's wallet, valued at over $20 billion today. Those Bitcoin have never moved and likely never will. I say likely, as in the plot twist more like sci-fi. Hal Finney was cryogenically frozen upon his death, becoming the 128th person to be preserved by the Alcor Life Extension Foundation, with the hope that one day he can be revived and restored to full health. If, and that is a big if, scientific advances allow humans to pull off such a feat, the world may one day know if Hal is indeed Satoshi. So, is Hal Finney Satoshi Nakamoto? Hal's wife Fran Finney is still alive and is sometimes active on Hal's Twitter account or in interviews. She reiterates that Hal was enthusiastic about Bitcoin and was technically the earliest of early adopters, but she knew her husband intimately and says that he is not Satoshi. If she knew he was, the only reason she would keep this quiet after his death would be to avoid unnecessary attention. For the final 9 months of Hal's life, the couple were famously harassed at their home by an anonymous attacker who demanded 1,000 Bitcoin to stop and even had a SWAT team called on their home at one point. Announcing that Hal was Satoshi would likely restart this awful harassment, as it would be assumed that she has access to either Satoshi's big wallet or other from the early Bitcoin mining that Hal did. Hal Finney was a die-hard Bitcoiner who gave his time, knowledge, and genius expertise to the project when it was in its infancy. He supported and believed in it at a time when others did not. And while the mystery of Satoshi may never be solved, few would argue that Hal Finney deserves a place in Bitcoin folklore as the protocol's first ever user. He is the joint #1 on most people's list alongside Nick Szabo, who we will discuss next.